So here's the economic update for the beginning of November. The unemployment rate is unchanged at 4.1% since last month, but the overall trend is it's still going up in the upward direction, and we'll see if that continues to go up. Payroll employment change month over month, there were 12,000 jobs added. That's pretty low. We were expecting more like 100,000 or so jobs to be added. Of these 12,000 jobs that were added, there were actually 40,000 government jobs added. So if you took the government jobs away, we had a net loss of jobs in the private sector. The other thing that was to the negative, revisions for the prior months actually went down significantly. That was July and August, I believe. And then layoffs and discharges were about 200,000 layoffs per month. That's up slightly for September, but it's still within the normal range, so I'm not really too worried at the moment about that. For the job openings, there's about 7.5 million. This has been steadily declining month over month. There are less and less jobs available for the number of people that would be looking for a job. This is pretty close to about 1.1 or so jobs per every unemployed person. The banking, so there's something called M1 and M2. M1 is like all your cash, coins, things like that. M2 is like all the cash, coins, as well as savings accounts, money market accounts, those things that you can get from the bank. That would be your money supply. So this is at least returned to going positive at 2.56%. It was at about minus 4.89% in 2023. The last time we saw something like this where we have a reduction in the money supply was actually during the 1930s and the Great Depression. So it looks like it's at least coming up. That's what we wanted to do. So that was a pretty big reduction in a historic sense. The other thing to keep an eye on, the non-owner occupied loans. Past due and non-accrual rates are going up currently. That means people aren't paying their bills. Things that are 90 plus days delinquent, those rates are going up across the board, except for student loans. Student loans actually are going down in the number of delinquencies, so that's one good area there. But mortgages, home equity loans, auto loans, credit cards, and other, they're all going up. This is an area to be concerned of as well. Bank-held unrealized gains, they're not gains, they're losses at this point. If they sold off their assets, they would sell them off at a loss. And part of the reason for that is if they bought bonds when bonds and like treasury bonds were very low, and now the interest rate is high, basically they would have to sell them at a loss. So this combined with if someone had a run on these banks, that's what was causing the failures of banks in 2023. So that's what happened to Silicon Valley Bank, whereas Signature and First Republic Bank, they had more exposure to cryptocurrency. So when those assets went down, effectively, and people caught wind of it, they tried to pull their money out of the bank, and that's what caused the bank to collapse. The Fed stepped in, and one of the things they did was say, okay, we'll have a window for banks. Effectively, if you have government bonds and the bank is going to go under, instead of letting the bank go under and going through FDIC and all that hassle, the Fed would just pay them out whatever the end value of the bond would be at maturity in exchange for the bond today. And that was one way they bailed out the banks again. Both the number of banks and the amount of assets that are problems for those problematic banks, they're starting to rise slightly. It's not yet a panic at the moment, but I'm keeping an eye on that. Inflation numbers did come in. These are always about a month or so behind. We have our consumer price index. Basically, that went up by 2.4% in September. Now, it's always funny because they give you a different headline number depending on what looks better. So generally they'll exclude food and energy because it makes this number lower. But this month, the CPI, if you subtract out food and energy, it actually went up by 3.3%, which is not the direction they would want. But the headlines are funny because they'll always pick the lower of the two numbers. Here's my prediction. November 7th of 2024, the FOMC are going to meet, and the Fed is probably going to reduce rates by about 1/4 to 0.5%. The Fed funds rate would then be somewhere about 4.5, 4.75%, somewhere in that range. So it looks like it'll probably go down again. So why do I think that? Well, the Fed has two mandates. One is keep maximum employment. About 3 to 5% is typically where you can get to maximum employment. And you want to have price stability. Generally, they're aiming for about 2% inflation. They don't want a lot of inflation because then prices of everything go up. And you don't want to go too low on inflation because the worst thing that could happen is not inflation, it's actually deflation. Slight inflation rather than deflation, so that's why it's kept usually about 2%. We're coming in close to the 2%, so inflation's not really a concern right now. But the maximum employment, this is the problem because what typically happens is, so we were at about 3.4% about a year ago, now we're at 4.1%. This starts to climb and it kind of feeds on itself. So imagine one person gets laid off, they can't pay some of their bills. Whoever's relying on that money that's coming in is no longer getting paid, so they're not going to go out and buy more materials, or they're not going to manufacture something, or they're not going to hire another person, or they may have to lay somebody else off because they're not receiving payments. So then that person gets laid off. Then that person can't afford their food, can't afford where to stay, and things like that. And then those people that rely on the income from that person paying for things is no longer getting their income. And you can see where this is going. More and more people get laid off, then people don't pay their bills. People then have more layoffs because they stop buying things. A couple of things that the Fed can do is basically reduce interest rates, print more money, buy up assets, things like that to help stimulate the economy. If there's more money in the system, effectively you have more inflation, but then you tend to retain more of the jobs. So then if you can avoid massive layoffs, then it's not like a feedback loop where more and more people are getting laid off. If you're interested in learning about how to make more money, how to save, how to invest, or how to start a new business, please subscribe. I have a lot of this content on the channel. Thank you for watching and have a great day.